So today I want to talk about Unibody MacBook Pros. These are the bread and butter of my YouTube channel. This is basically what launched my entire career in a way. The first successful video I ever uploaded on this channel was when I bought a 2011 15-inch MacBook Pro and souped it up with some RAM and an SSD back in 2017. But since then, obviously 5 years has gone by and the newest Unibody MacBook Pros are now 10. They'd be almost graduated elementary school by now. And we're gonna find out, are these older MacBook Pros still legitimate computing options now in 2022? Let's jump into it. So first, a quick history lesson. Before the Unibody MacBook Pro design came out in 2008, Apple had been using essentially a carryover of the PowerBook G4, which introduced in 2003. Now, the G4 was a perfectly good design, but what made the Unibody special was that they changed the way that we think about manufacturing laptops. Before 2008, pretty much every laptop out there had a frame on the inside, a palm rest and keyboard assembly that screwed on from the top, and a bottom case that screwed on from the bottom. That was just the assumptive way to build a laptop. But in 2008, Apple decided, no, we're not gonna do that anymore. That's old news. Instead, they came up with this. A device where the top case with the palm rest and that the keyboard screws into is the structure for the laptop. It's one piece milled out of aluminum that allows the device to be cleaner, simpler, lighter, thinner, and stronger. So that's pretty solid, right? That is a pretty long list of extremely beneficial qualities to introduce to a laptop. So it's no wonder that these things were extremely popular during their production from 2008 to 2012. Now, the ones that I have here today are the newest and the most powerful of each of the three sizes. So we have a 13-inch with the fully loaded Core i7, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and I think this one has a terabyte of SSD storage. We've got a 15-inch also with the loaded Core i7, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and another 1 terabyte SSD. And we have this, which is the 2011 17-inch with the fully loaded Core i7 and 16 gigabytes of RAM. Oh, and you guessed it, a terabyte SSD upgrade. And so the question is, with them being as good as it gets, are they still good? And should you get one? Let's break it down one at a time. We'll go smallest to largest. So we'll put these guys off to the side. So this MacBook Pro I actually built in collaboration with iFixit almost 2 years ago. And essentially the goal here was to build the best 13-inch MacBook Pro that you could get. So we've got a new battery, RAM, SSD, cleaned out and repasted the logic board, new top case, new bottom case, new display. So this represents the ideal situation. But if you go on eBay and do a quick search for mid-2012 MacBook Pros, you'll find that these things are a dime a dozen, quite literally, because they did not discontinue this until 2016. Yeah, they sold the 13-inch Unibody MacBook Pro for 4 years without changing it at all. It's kind of crazy. But as a result, there are quite literally a million of these things, and they're so cheap. In fact, they're so cheap that I wouldn't buy any other 13-inch MacBook Pro unless it's literally given away. Because the 2012, not only can it run macOS Catalina, not only does it support handoff and continuity because it has the newer Bluetooth and Wi-Fi module, not only does it support 16 gigabytes of 1600 megahertz DDR3 and SATA 6 gigabyte per second SSDs. Oh, and I almost forgot that it has Thunderbolt and USB 3. So for those reasons alone, this is the MacBook Pro that you want to get. The parts for these things are so cheap, you could take a saw through the screen and just go replace it for like $25. In terms of performance, don't even worry about it, all right? Intel HD Graphics 4000 and this old Core i7, it's not gonna do much for you. It's a dual core. Don't expect literally anything apart from web browsing and video streaming. Let's move on to the 15-inch. This guy is similarly completely loaded out. We also have the nice little bonus features like being able to use faster SSDs, USB 3.0, Thunderbolt, the newer Wi-Fi and Bluetooth module that lets you use handoff and continuity. Those are all things that make the 2012 really, really appealing. If you go back to 2016 and 2017 especially, these things were the bee's knees. Because when you look at the comparison between CPU performance for a 2012 and a 2017 MacBook Pro, despite 5 years difference, there's not much in that. So a lot of people were like, okay, so I have a choice between a butterfly keyboard and a touch bar, no upgradability and no ports, because it's 2017 and we haven't really gotten on the USB-C bandwagon yet. Or I could save thousands of dollars, upgrade the storage myself, upgrade the RAM myself, and have basically the same CPU performance. I'm gonna do that every day of the week. If you wanna get one of these 15-inch mid-2012s, you can find them on eBay for right around, or significantly under in some cases, $200. Right off the bat, less than $200 for a perfectly good 15-inch MacBook Pro is a pretty safe bet. And that's especially true when you consider that these have similar CPU performance to much newer and more expensive machines. So these might not be replacing new MacBooks anymore, but when you look at other used MacBooks, this is still a good deal. Now, the 15-inch MacBook Pro, we do have to be careful for, because the mid-2012s are undeniably very well revered, but you can also go back and find 2011s, 2010, 2009, even the original ones from 2008. And they all get respectively cheaper. However, I don't necessarily think that they're cheap enough, especially the 2011s. Those honestly are only like $20, $30, $40 cheaper than a 2012. And for that, you lose out on the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth module, USB 2.0, the faster SSDs, and most importantly, they have graphics card failures. Even the 2010s can have a couple of issues, so those can be a little iffy. And by the time you get to 2010, 2009, 2008, look, it's $100, this is $160. This is absolutely worth an extra $60. So the same applies for the 13-inch as well. As you get into the older ones with Core 2 Duos, you're not saving enough money that it's worth buying. They're still okay, you can still use them, but chuck in an extra 30, 40 bucks. Get yourself something a little nicer. So now let's talk about the 17-inch MacBook Pros. These are weird. So while the rest of the unibody range made it to 2012, the 17-inch got killed off. And that's a little unfortunate because, as we've discussed, the 2011s have pretty bad graphics card failure rates. So this isn't something that I could really recommend. However, I honestly think that the 17-inch MacBook Pro is a pretty big tragedy, really, because the screen is lovely. It's 1920 by 1200, which is a pretty decent resolution and pixel density. It's very usable now in 2022, and because it's this larger form factor, it actually has pretty slim bezels. So, like, as an execution of the unibody design language, I think this actually looks really, really nice, but you don't really get any extra features. It's a larger screen, you get an extra USB port, and a compact flash slot, which you're probably not going to use. So you're not really getting features or performance, you're just getting bigness and a little bit of extra cost. These things run close to $200. And the problem with that is that's also the price of the 2012 15-inch. So you either get the very flawed and feature-lacking 17-inch, or for the same price, you get the much more common, supported, and powerful 15-inch. I think it's a pretty obvious choice, but I do understand why the 17-inch has an appeal. In fact, for a long time, these things were kind of like cult classics, and there was this trend on eBay where people would basically deck these things out with 16 gigabytes of RAM, dual booted SSDs, and they would sell for like $2,000. And this is not a long time ago, I'm talking like 2018. If you're going to buy one of these devices, now in 2022, you really have to consider the context of their pricing. I always maintain that whenever you're shopping for a laptop and you're looking at machines in your budget, what you should do is add 20, 30, 40 bucks to your budget and see if that'll get you something nicer. Case in point, let's set up an eBay search here for machines with the NVIDIA GT 750M and the AMD Radeon R9 M370X. So that's gonna get you late 2013 to mid 2015 dual graphics 15-inch MacBook Pros. You'll notice that right at the top of this list, there are some devices which are getting ridiculously cheap. $180 for a 2014, $250 for one. But if you're looking at something like this, which looks like a pretty decent average condition 2014 MacBook Pro for $280, you're only looking at an extra $80 over the Unibody, and you're getting NVMe storage. You're getting a Retina display, which is a big difference. It's also thinner and lighter. So it's interesting because I wouldn't really say that this is a bad deal, the 15-inch mid-2012, but I think it would be worth an extra $100 to get pretty much any one of a ton of Retinas that you can choose from. If I were making this choice, I think I would probably stretch and go for the Retina, quite honestly. Because I think these unibodies are now reaching a point in their lives where it's less about here's a DIY way to get yourself a cheap but just as good as a new one MacBook, and they're now starting to reach that point of like, okay, these are old, arguably vintage devices that can be used in a pinch, but I wouldn't necessarily rely on them for years to come. So I'm curious to know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments below. As usual, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.